Welcome to the CX Engine Show, where we're fueling growth through CX. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, the one and only Brooke Sellas. Brooke, how are you today?
I'm actually suffering from seasonal allergies.
Bless
It's
your little
gorgeous
heart.
out, but
Yeah.
like everything's like in my head right now.
Well, hoping our guest isn't filled with in her head, but we're joined by the amazing Ginger Shimp. Ginger, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. And Brooke, I've been there. It's kind of like thinking through applesauce, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great, or mashed potato. That's such a great analogy. Yes. It's just like everything just feels like I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Balloon head. So I want to kind of start us off with how Ginger and I met, which actually goes back to Kenneth, because Kenneth, you got me a speaking gig.
I was the content director for that. Yeah.
Yes. So you got me a speaking gig last year at DigimarCon, where Ginger was also a speaker. And one of the reasons why we're having her on the show, and this story that she told on stage, was absolutely fascinating. And I'll let you tell it, Ginger, because it's your story. But you were on stage talking about content, because that's what your role is at SAP. And you were saying how you got, I forget the percentage lift, but I want to say it was like triple digit lift on a piece of your content. Like I think it was a report or a white paper. And you came up with the idea, or the team did, of making an audio version of that piece of content. And you got this massive lift. Can you like tell the story really quickly so I don't tell it wrong?
Yeah,
1,000,000%.
It was very close to that. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the numbers were, we have a report somewhere in Excel that I can type up to prove that. No, I think what you're talking about, Brooke, was we did a piece of content, we did a white paper, and then we started to version it into, because I work with different industries. So we wanted to customize the white paper for various industries. And then we started atomizing the content. And what we did was we pulled, you know, different little pieces out of the white papers, and we're promoting them left, right, and upside down, and having everything point back to the original piece of content. And while we were coming up with the different ways to atomize it, at one point I was working with a colleague, Jeff Januszewski, and he says it was my idea. I say it was his idea. So it was one of those moments where our minds just melded, and we said, you know what we should do is create an audiobook format of this paper. And we created audio white papers. And as far as we know, no one had ever done that before. But man, was that powerful. We had incredible lift. And we were just off to the races from there. And I was sold.
Shout out Jeff. And also, I just have to tell you, I mean, I could tell you not on the show, but I might as well tell you on the show, because maybe this will give people who are listening or watching more ideas. I took your idea, and my last newsletter that I put out quarterly, I made a video version so you could listen or watch the video version. And we had a 20% lift in not only click-throughs, but also like the watch rate, read rate went way up on the newsletter. So thank you for that idea. And if you're listening, steal that idea from Ginger or Jeff. Well, shout out Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, when you get right down to it, and I'm not going to go on and on and on and on and on, but I really could. Audio is a very immersive sort of media format, right? It really spurs the memorability. That's just a really hard word for me to get out of my mouth, but you know, connection and trust of your audience, right? It beats out so many other forms of media, and it's because people can hear the passion and the enthusiasm and the expertise in your subject matter experts' voice, and you can't really pick that up sometimes with just words on a page.
Yeah, we're going to get a lot deeper into that. Yeah, we're going to get a lot deeper into that subject. I love it. So tell us what your role is sort of in the day of the life of Ginger. Not of a Ginger, but of Ginger Shimp.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a global content lead for the industries and sustainabilities at SAP. So we're a global software company. Depending on the day of the week, the time of the day, or who you ask, we're probably the largest global software company out there, but we are definitely amongst the top 5. And my team and I are responsible for managing all of the content that goes out around sustainability and the different vertical industries. And we support, at last count, like 35 different vertical industries.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we talk about audio content, how has this been? Obviously, you told this amazing story, right? Which I just am obsessed with. But beyond that story, how has audio been influencing your content marketing and, on top of that, the customer experience? Because it sounds like you had a great lift in customer experience because of the lift that you had with the audio content.
Absolutely. We had, I would say, an equal mixture of insight and luck. So the insight, of course, was our just talking about our own experiences, because we are consumers at the end of the day, right? Companies don't buy our software, people do, right? And so that's what got Jeff and me talking about it, was, the fact, what is it that we like to consume? And we were talking about how we were listening. So that got us started. And I'm sorry, Brooke, if I go off topic a little, just pull me back and I'll get there.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. No,
you've hung out with me enough. He's used to it.
They're so funny. No, so I think the part that I want to get across is when we started thinking about how we ourselves like to consume information, that's what really kicked us over into exploring audio more and more and more, because it was a little bit more affordable than doing video, because of course we were doing video with your typical 4-man 3-camera crew, right? So very expensive way to do video. This was probably in around 2016, 2017 that we started on this path. So once we started thinking about the fact that we wanted to do audio, we looked for ways that we could inject it into our content strategy. So maybe we didn't want to just do a tweet card. We wanted to do what we called an audiogram. And an audiogram, it's little more than you have a static image, and maybe you have that little heartbeat that goes across it as people are speaking, but then you embed the audio behind it. So people don't have to read what's on the card. They could hear somebody else read it to them. Ditto with the white papers. White papers can be very difficult to read. Each sentence is just jam-packed with information. And sometimes, they go on for 6 lines. And it's the case of you have to know how it's going to end before you can get the tonality right in your head at the beginning. So you wind up reading that sentence over and over and over. But if you hire someone to read it to you, they do the heavy lifting. And so it just smooths out the entire process for you. So now let's jump ahead a little bit to where the luck played in. And COVID hit, and 2020 happened, and we had the commute rate just plummeted. But at the same time, listenership just skyrocketed on so many different types of content, especially like audiobooks, etc. And that's what really started to help us. And what we opined was that while people were working from home, they were multitasking more. And you needed something that allowed them to disengage from the screen and still absorb the content, right? So podcasts took off in a big way. We saw the advent of audio first social sites, right? Kenneth, I think you were the first one to invite me to some of those. And at the same time, when we started pushing our content out, where we were saying, here's various white papers from different types of analysts, and you could listen to them while you're running to the store, while you're picking up the kids, while you're, maybe you're putting them on your smart speaker while you're, creating your dinner, or, whatever you happen to be doing at the time, because you were social distancing. I think having that voice in your ear sort of helped you feel a little bit more connected. So that's, my own personal opinion. And, we all joked that the extroverts were the ones we were worried about. The introverts staying at home, working by themselves, were doing okay. But the extroverts were really suffering. And so, being able to connect with them via audio was caretaking in a way that we hadn't actually looked for.
So when
that was long. I apologize.
That's okay. It's all good. So,
yeah, all super helpful.
Exactly. Cut out that one part that you had. No, it was all great. It was fantastic. So When you think about this also from how audio affects customer experience, what's the perception to you with audio and how like your end users will build that relationship of trust and really how you treat your customers? Because I, to your point, thinking about putting a voice, it also depends on what type of voice you put on there. One that sort of, speaks in a trusting language versus somebody that sounds really sketchy, but it can really build a bridge with the right kind of conversationalist, if you will, with the right kind of voice.
Well, and I would add to that too, Ginger. How do you get insights from that content? So if they're listening to that, if they read something, they might email you, or if there's a place for comments, they might comment. But like if it's audio, how do you get that voice of customer data back?
Absolutely. So, the obvious thing is you're looking at the listen through rate, right? And the listen through rate is incredible on long form content. And this kind of makes sense because, if you're listening to a podcast, you're going to listen through to the end. If you're listening to an ad, you might drop after you say, oh, that's a shoe ad. I don't need shoes. Right. So the short form content, it's a little bit harder and you have to be really strategic there with targeting. So we probably can get into that later. But with the long form content, if they start it, they want to hear the end. And I think this actually also really dictates that marketers tap into their storytelling expertise as well. You need to have a beginning, middle, and end. One of my favorite examples is if you go and you looked at the Mona Lisa and you really like it, like you can make up a story about what is she smiling about, what is happening there. But if you come back in 3 years, nothing has changed, right? Stories are change over time, right? And the change is, especially in a B2B audience, is that people are doing better because they're using our products or services. That's the change, right? And so you have to have a story arc. People are, we gravitate towards that. It's ever since you gathered around the flickering flame, right? Well, you're gathering around, you're listening to a story, and you want to know the end. So the listen through rate, easy. Some of the other things that you can do is make sure that you always have a really good call to action. So you might want to come up with a vanity URL. One case in point is I listened to a podcast for fun. It's called Moms and Murder, and it has my son very nervous. But they had an ad for a shoe that I had never heard of before.
Yeah.
Right. So one of their sponsors had a shoe ad. I had never heard of it before, but you go to the brand/murder. I mean, that's a very memorable URL, right? Yes. I'm not saying that we would ever do SAP/murder, right? It's not going to happen.
But Dads and Kidnapping is available.
There you go. But come up with a very memorable URL so that the people who are on the go listening to your audio content, it'll stick in their head. It'll be the earworm that will drive them back to their URL. And you only use it in your audio content. And it's one of the ways that you can really tell that your audio content is working. And of course, Kenneth, we've talked about some other ways that you could use advertising, et cetera. But those are the two key things. Look at your listen through rate, right? Are they dropping off after 20 minutes of a 1 hour piece of content? Then you probably have to fix something. But if they're listening, and most of the research out there is showing that the listen through rate on audio content is up in the 80-90% on long form content. I know, but I mean, think about it. When was the last time you listened to an audiobook and chapter 16 out of 50, you said, yeah, I'm done. It happens, but not that often.
Not often. Yeah, that's amazing. And that's an amazing tip about the earworm. Like hashtag murder. What about, let's talk about a little bit of, I don't want to be, I'll play devil's advocate. Let's just call it that. Okay. So you and I also talked about this a little bit at the Digital Marcon event, but audio at one time was like all the rage with marketers, right? Everybody was talking about the importance of audio and smart speakers and, all of those things. But it's kind of, in my mind, fallen off a little bit. Like, what's your opinion on, smart speakers, voice marketing? Where do you think we're going? Do you think it fell off just because there are other interesting things happening, or what's the deal there?
Alexa. Sorry. I said Alexa.
Oh.
Well, okay, so there's a couple of things that I think that I think are happening, right? I'd be really interested for you guys to weigh in too. But so on the one hand, I think that audio is not falling off. It's just how people choose to consume the audio, right? So they still have their phones. And I think that that's probably the primary way that people consume their audio, right? I know, when I'm walking, when I'm working out, I'm listening to business content half the time, and half the time I'm listening to fun content. We know that just about any piece of content you create can become audio because we've got search engines that are optimized for voice, right? So yet again, in terms of caretaking of your customers, you might want to write in a more conversational tone to really aid with the voice to text, right? But when it comes to the smart speakers, I think one of the issues is some people still think that there's this thing called privacy. I think privacy's dead. There is no privacy, right?
Gone, honey, gone.
Right. Bye-byes.
Yeah.
But I do believe, there are a lot of companies out there with work from home people, and they mandate that those smart speakers cannot be in their work from home space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a smart speaker, it can be in your bedroom, it can be in your kitchen, as long as you're not working there, right? So if you have a home office set up, definitely don't put it in there. And I think that, that might be why a lot of people don't look at their audio content and create the Alexa app for it. And I forget what that's called. I know it's not called an Alexa app.
Echo.
You get what I'm
Echo device.
It's the sorry. It's the actual command that.
Oh, hey, Alexa.
Whatever. Yes.
Well,
we all know what we're talking about.
In that same vein, I have a friend who she's in a different department now, but she works for Amazon, and she was in the Alexa department, and they have teams and teams and teams of people who are listening to like the Hey Alexa prompts, trying to figure out how they can get better. But I also know there are teams of people listening to other things that the smart speakers picks up. So I understand the privacy part, but I think you've proven already the power of voice, right? It just might not be with smart speakers.
It's the same struggle that we're having with, like Chat GPT or whatever, right? You don't want to put confidential information into one of those apps and have it rewrite it for you. You're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you're obviously not going to put confidential information out over a smart speaker. If you happen to be listening to my audio paper via one of the smart speakers, I'm a happy camper because I built that thing for you to do just that.
Right.
Well, when you think about, you mentioned it earlier, so I want to tap back into this about advertising on audio. I think obviously this is a world that I've spent a lot of time in as well in advertising. And you think about the contextuality and how it can help improve the relationship with the consumer that's seeing that. But where do you think about audio advertising in particular?
I am a fan, guys. Sign me up. Because if you think about the platforms, how they work. Okay, so some people may not know how they work. So first of all, I think on a cost basis, it's more affordable. But what makes it more affordable is because it's targeted, right? So if you want to put your ad out, your audio ad out on a podcast, so you say, oh, I know these two people who do a marketing podcast, and I want to reach marketers, right? And I want them to live in this geography or that geography. I want them to work for this size business or this size business. And I want them to work in this industry or that industry, right? You can set all of those parameters, write your ad so that it talks right to them. So when they're on a buyer's journey, you want to resonate with them. And so with audio ads, they're listening to the podcast on whatever platform. And when it's time for a commercial, when it's time for an ad, the ad that is served up to them is tuned for them. Mm-hmm. So remember, we talked about the listen through rate and how it's greater on long form content than on short form content, because you might be getting an ad that doesn't work for you. If somebody's giving me an ad for Bud Light, nothing against Bud Light, but I don't drink beer. I don't drink any kind of beer. And so I'm not going to listen to it, right?
Not even ginger beer?
I do. I have had ginger beer.
Sorry, I had to.
But, Bud would be wasting their time advertising to me. And so that would drive their costs up. But if I drink, say, Diet Pepsi, and Diet Pepsi served their ad to me, I would probably listen to it because it's something I'm tuned to. It's something that I consume. Same thing works for B2B content, that works for B2C content. And that's why I love when you start talking about audio advertising, because of the ability to target. Now, here's the key thing, right? You want people to get your message. And I'm talking to the expert here, so Kenneth, try not to laugh at me. But you want people to get the message. You have a great call to action. They happen to follow through on that call to action. You have to be able to follow through on your end really well and know that that's where they came from. So again, we're back to tracking URLs. My current boss is just genius at the whole marketing ops thing. I've learned so much from her, and I've gotten so much better than I was way back when. But being able to see that these people, to hear that these people came in, heard your ad, were motivated to respond. Now you got to follow through. So, you really get to play with the whole buyer journey there. To me, I'm a geek. I love it.
Well, there's a lot of things about attribution in audio and podcasting in particular that is horrible, except for where you can drive an experience. And
yeah,
it's almost not immeasurable is not the right word. I'm not trying to be too quaint with it, but it just creating that good feeling doesn't necessarily have to equate to how many downloads either,
It doesn't. It's actually a perception thing. Now, we already talked a lot about smart speakers, but there was a poll out recently, and it was like 60% of people felt that smart speaker ads were actually less intrusive, right? Over half of them found that they were more engaging. Well, it's probably because the ads were tuned to them, right? And so you get that general lift, So, as marketer, I'm in love. I'm just geeking out on that.
No, I love it too. Well, so final question for you. You are the global head of content. So for the global aspect of audio, how does that relate to all of the industries and verticals that you serve? And what about the people who don't speak English as a first language? Are you putting out content in multiple languages?
So the answers are yes, all over the place. But so yes, we do a lot of what we call localization, right? Because you can't just do a word for word translation. So we have to localize for our audiences in the different markets. But one of the things that we found by accident, it was so cool. My one colleague, she works in, she's about an hour outside Mexico City, I think. And English is not her first language. So hats off to her. And she's brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant marketers I've worked with. Her name is Claudia. And she got a hold of one of our audio white papers, and I think she was marketing it. And what she came back with was that it was so much of a, it was such a, I work in marketing, I know how to use words. She said it was such a better experience. Again, think about how hard it is to write a white paper. Think about how hard it is to read a white paper. Now try to imagine doing that in a language that isn't native to you. So when she had the audio going and she had the words in front of her, she was completely immersed, and she got through the paper and understood it and comprehended it because she had both pieces, the words as well as the words coming at her off the paper and through her ears. And we had never thought about that. So we're doing some more testing on that in some of the other locales to see, do we go on ahead and continue, because it gets very, very costly to translate, but it's what we do to take care of our customers. But it takes more time to get it to market that way. Mm-hmm. We might be able to get to market a little bit faster if we don't have to write, edit, proof, layout, record, and now localize.
Well, so and that's where AI may come in, right? Like AI could probably translate for you at some point. I don't think we're there yet, but you could probably input a piece of paper to something like ChatGPT and tell it to translate that paper into Spanish or Mandarin.
Right. I mean, Kenneth, you speak Portuguese, right? So it's a tool. What if we put it into a translator, some sort of, Google Translate, whatever translator it is? What if we put it through that? But because we're a global company, we have native speakers. So maybe we can then go to one of our native speakers and say, okay, now that we've done the heavy lifting and we've gotten 80% there, can you read through and help us correct? And at some point they're going to come back to us because there's going to be an idiom that we use in English that doesn't really translate. Yeah. And they're going to have to understand what we're saying and then say, oh, okay, well, here we would say this. And it's not a translation at all. It's a complete localization. But now it will resonate better.
And you think about that with different Spanish translations. There's so much difference between the way people pronounce things from Mexico to Cuba to Spain and so on and so forth. And then there's words that people in Spain use that are completely different than what they use in Argentina or Venezuela. So there's so much localization to that as well, and where that can get deeper and deeper with all kinds of languages.
Wait, and you know what? You don't even have to think of outside English. I mean, if you've ever watched shows, say from
Don't insult the South.
Britain.
British, yes, the British shows. Like some of those Brit humor is hard to follow for me personally, but then they would say the same thing about our stuff, I'm sure.
Well, what I was thinking is just they say the words differently. We might, and now of course I can't think of an exact word. Oh,
they do. We say petroleum and they say
petrol.
No, they say
they accent different syllables.
Yes.
Yes. Sure.
I'm trying to think because I heard it the other day. I was like, well, do what now? Oh, they're talking about petroleum. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if it's that hard in a language we all speak, we three speak, it can't be any easier in languages we don't speak. You're going to run into exactly the same problems. And then the next thing up, of course, would be trying to find a way to do ASL, right? Because there are tremendous number of people who, they're not going to read it. They're not going to listen to it. So, audio is paving the way for us to think outside, traditional ways of producing our content. It's so fun.
I know. I love that. Thinking about how to be inclusive with your content outside of, creating audio content or written content, like content for people who are hearing impaired or seeing impaired. Yeah. I love the inclusivity of that idea.
And at the end, it's all about, what's your strategy? Is it grow the market or is it steal share? Well, this helps you do both.
Exactly. Well, and, in relation to for hearing impaired, you and I've had this conversation probably several years ago, though. I've got one of my best friends is deaf. And when she reads content that we think that we're transcribing so that they can read it, we might forget to put in the words that are somebody being silly, and you have to put in, brackets laughter so that somebody has a clue what you're talking about. So it really does help you think about not just the message, but how we communicate the message so much more.
It's more like writing a script, right?
Exactly.
Where you have to put in stage directions.
Yeah.
Not just the words, but cue laughter or sound of a dog barking or sound of a dog not barking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ginger, thank you so much for coming on and being our guest and telling us all about how I'm like thinking of the title, like voice content and CX lift. Like it's so fascinating because like I said, I truly mean it. We met each other. You told that amazing story about SAP and the white papers on the stage. I tried it with my own newsletter and I saw a very big lift as well. So I'm
so glad.
I'm behind what you're doing. I just did it. I literally just did it. I'll forward it to you. But yeah, so I'm just excited because I know it works. And I hope that the people who are listening or watching understand that this is something to consider if you're looking for different ways to, distribute your content.
Well, but it goes beyond that. It's even your internal, audiences, right? If you're thinking about how to reach a huge, diverse sales force, right? Wouldn't you like to be able to talk to all of them? Unfortunately, so-and-so is in Australia and somebody else is in, Madrid, and then you have somebody in Palo Alto, right? Those are some really crazy time zones. But if you're recording it, then you can still get to them with the audio. And so I am going to mention a company. I'm not paid to mention them at all. But as far as I know, they're the only ones who do this. It's a company called Venly. And what they do is they take my audio content and they actually embed it in PDFs. So I don't have such a hard time getting through other people's firewalls, right? So when my PDFs are being emailed around, people can click on the little button and they can actually hear the embedded content. Well, think about, one of the things that they do is for like training and for employee upskilling and so forth, again, being able to take those recordings and break it down into sound bites, if you will, and embed it into pieces. So now you've got audio that doesn't have to stand by itself, but it's augmenting pieces that you would already send around anyway, whether it's an internal distribution list or you're sending it out to customers and prospects and partners.
That's amazing. We'll get the link to that site from you and make sure we include it in the show notes so everybody can check out Vinly.
That would be very nice. Like I said, there may be other people other companies that do that. I just haven't found them. I think it's a proprietary technology, and I just love it.
Everybody, I hope you have enjoyed listening to Ginger as much as I have, and I'm pretty sure Shark has too. We knew we were going to love her, but now I love her even more. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Details on how to connect with us, meaning you should go to LinkedIn. Is that where you are most hanging out these days? Yeah. I'm not really on Twitter anymore. So find Ginger, myself, Kenneth on LinkedIn. That's where we're hanging out because Twitter's on fire. And if you want to nominate someone who you think would be a great guest for the CX Engine Show, let us know. Tell us all about them. Hook us up. I just got an email today on LinkedIn from a friend of mine who suggested someone who will be an upcoming guest. And we're looking forward to chatting with you next time all about the customer experience and how it's fueling growth. See you on the next show, everybody.
Thank you, guys.